Donald Trump is now president-elect. So when he was candidate Trump, he announced his immigration policies. Now he's president-elect. So what does his announcement means to the undocumented immigrants living in the United States?
So undocumented immigrants living in the United States need to take this time before the president-elect becomes president to really meet with an immigration attorney, someone trusted, to assess what their options are. We don't know a lot about what President-elect Trump is going to actually do. Some of the policies he's described are considered incredibly inhumane by many of the government officials that he will need to work with in order to implement them. And some of the policies he described are the kinds of policies that would take weeks, months, maybe even years to implement. So we don't have a lot of concrete information about what he's actually going to follow through with, but we should all be using this time to assess our own personal situations and to meet with an attorney who can be trusted to give people the right advice.
And is there any help available on city, state, or federal level for these immigrant communities?
Yes, so here in New York City and New York State, there are many resources available. New York State offers a hotline for people to call through the Division for New Americans. The city provides access to a number of programs. People can call 311 here in New York City to get a list of that information and also to go online. This information is provided in multiple languages so that people can get access to lawyers.
Donald Trump, after his election, said that he is determined to deport 2 to 3 million undocumented immigrants who have a criminal record. So is someone is able to check whether he has any kind of a criminal record by chance and he does not know?
Yes, so sometimes it can be a scary process because often in order to check whether or not you might have a past criminal record, you have to submit fingerprints, and that can be a scary process. So we don't recommend that anyone goes about trying to do this on their own. What we do think people should do if they're worried that they recall maybe an encounter with a police officer, they're not sure if there's a record about it, is to work with a community organization to do that kind of inquiry. So many of the public defender offices in the city can be approached with this. And there's also an organization called the Immigrant Defense Project that works specifically with immigrants who may have a criminal record to assess whether or not they have a record and what their options are.
We see a little change in candidate Trump and president-elect. You know, now he's not talking about wall, he's talking about fence. Mitt Romney called upon him the other day. So do you think we will also going to see this change in his immigration policies and the decisions he's going to take after January 20th?
Well, absolutely. I mean,
is there any hope?
Yes, so there always has to be hope. And the amazing work that immigrant communities have done on the ground has been the source for any good program that we've ever had in our history. So communities that are organizing around this issue have to continue to pressure the president-elect to do the right thing and to really focus on true comprehensive immigration reform rather than these kind of scare tactics that will only result in millions of American families being torn apart. But while we hope and fight and organize for the best, we also have to prepare for the worst. And that's why every individual who may be afraid about their immigration status or what the president-elect's policies may do to target them should meet with a qualified immigration attorney to talk through their options.
Right. And one more question, if somebody get detained, like what his family members are supposed to do? In case, immigrant communities, they have language barriers. They don't know where to go for help or where to go to get some kind of a legal assistance. So what advice you are going to give to our household ladies especially?
Sure. So right now, before something happens, it's important to start to gather together your documents, the kinds of things that you can imagine might be helpful for a future immigration case. So this may be your own identification documents, birth certificates, copies of passports, things that you may collected over time that you can imagine an immigration lawyer would want to see. It's important to collect these documents in a safe place where your family has access to them and to let them know how to find them. It's also important not to give away any of your original documents to anyone else. If someone wants to see them, an immigration lawyer, for example, you can send them a copy, but you want to keep access. Now, if you end up being detained and arrested, or if you have a family member who does, if you haven't developed a relationship with an immigration lawyer already, you certainly can reach out again to nonprofit organizations, free legal services to get trusted advice, and you can call 311 to get more information in New York City about which organizations are available to provide that assistance. But it's important to prepare ahead of time so you don't feel like you have to scramble if you do have a loved one who gets arrested by immigration officials.
And Alina, if a Muslim American community once upon required to go for a registration with the federal officials, so what does it means to the community, and what does especially it means to the undocumented Muslim American community members?
So after September 11th, we saw a special registration program that targeted people generally from Muslim-majority countries who are undocumented and asking them to register. At the time, many people in the community believed that if they came forward and registered and hadn't done anything wrong, they would be safe. But we know what happened. We know that that program resulted in the deportation of so many individuals. It gutted whole communities in New York City. Where people who came forward and tried to do the right thing ended up being deported. So we've learned from that experience. If something like special registration happens again, I think the legal community of lawyers, of community activists, organizers will come together and make sure that before anyone does something to try and comply with the program, they have the right information, they understand what their rights and responsibilities are under any new law, and more importantly, that before a program like that is actually implemented, we as a legal community will do everything in our power to fight against that program because it is targeting people based on religion, no matter how they try to code it in other terms.
And my last question, what is your personal assessment? What is going to happen?
Well, the reality is many of the immigrants whom I work with, who I represent, have always been targeted. They've been targeted under every administration, even the ones that are progressive. We've seen President Obama, for all of the wonderful things that he has tried to do, he has deported more immigrants than any other administration, all administrations combined before him. That's the reality, and so I do believe we need to be prepared. Even if we have a continuation of the programs that are currently in place, that means hundreds of thousands of people deported and detained each year. And if it's expanded, which is what the expectation is, we need to be prepared to protect everyone in our community.
One more question. What would be the status of the DACA? And another, what would be the status of the President Obama's executive order case that has sent back to Texas Supreme Court?
That's right. So the president issued the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program through his executive action, and as a result, that means a future president can rescind that action and eliminate the program. So that's a possibility. That's something that the president-elect has indicated that he would do. Whether he will do that is another question because it is a political decision. In terms of the case, as people know, states sued to stop the second half of the president's program, which was to expand DACA and to also allow parents of U.S. citizens and green card holders to apply. That program was stayed nationwide by the courts, meaning it wasn't ever placed into force. And now that court case, the entire case, looks like it will be held for the president-elect to weigh in. So we don't expect those programs to move forward. And in terms of DACA, which has been in place, it remains to be seen whether the president-elect is going to eliminate the program.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.